Hello, and welcome to A Smart Financial Plan, where we interview the best and brightest in financial planning research about their studies and the best practices financial planners can use to enhance the financial lives of their clients. Today, we're interviewing Dr. Lurtz, who teaches at Columbia, University of Maryland, and Kansas State University, and who has conducted research into the time spent on financial planning by financial planners through assorted software programs. The time spent on financial planning is directly related to the depth that financial planners get into with their clients, but can also be a major determinant of both price and profitability in a financial planning practice. You won't want to miss it. Well, Dr. Lurtz, thank you for sitting down with me today. We're here to learn a little bit about some research you did recently. But first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, where you're working, all that?
Sure. So thanks for having me on. My name is Meghaan Lurtz, and my main job is I'm a writer and a researcher for Kidsis.com. I'm the one that tends to write a lot about the connection between psychology and money, but like we're going to talk about today, I also write about some of the research that I do with my counterpart, Dr. Derek Tharp, and oftentimes other researchers, and Michael. So I write about that research as well. I'm an educator. I work for the University of Maryland University College in their undergraduate CFP program, which is not exclusively military, but it's largely military. I'm a military spouse. So I feel that's important to give back to that particular community in the way that I can. And then I teach at Kansas State University and also at Columbia University, working with master's students and PhD students at those universities, also within CFP board programs. I'm a past president of the Financial Therapy Association, and I'm currently living in Europe in the COVID times. I'm in Spain, and luckily I've been able to, through university connections, connect with some researchers here in Europe and actually start working with some different universities here that want to further their CFP programs and bring in that financial psychology piece, continuing a lot of the great work, started by Dr. Brad Klontz, Dr. Sonia Luter, Dr. Christy Archuleta, Dr. Grable, just like a few. I'm very lucky to stand on the shoulders of so many very impressive giants.
Well, and I'll also say thank you, since we're recording this on both Veterans Day. You're a military spouse, I'm a veteran, so thank you for both giving back there, and then again for all the research and work that you do. So today I think we're talking about a piece you've done very recently, or a study you've completed recently. What was that called, and succinctly, what was that about?
So I wrote a paper with Dr. Derek Tharp, Dr. Kate Mielitz, both graduates of Kansas State University, Dr. Alan Ammerman, also a graduate of Kansas State University, and Michael Kitsis. And the name of the paper was Exploring Relationships Between Technology Use and Time Spent in the Financial Planning Process. And this was data collected by myself, Dr. Derek Tharp, and Michael Kitsis through our platform, or through the Kitsis platform. One of the things that's really cool about the work that I do with Michael and with Derek is that we endeavor to do research on financial planners. And so for this particular paper, we were interested in, knowing whether, all software promises efficiencies. And so we wondered, how does that translate into financial planning work? Does the technology that financial planners use, make them faster? And so that's what we were curious about, and we were luckily able to collect the data to do that.
Sure. It's sort of a personal interest for me as well, in the research that I'm doing as part of my own studies. I'm quite interested in sort of planning efficacy, right? Does planning work? Does it actually produce greater or lesser results if you do it differently? And I know one of the questions I often have is, does more planning equal better planning, or is it sort of that classic hourly problem where the slow reader gets paid more than the fast reader? So something like software is of course valuable, as a tool for financial planners, but it obviously can probably make a pretty big difference both in how your practice runs and everything else. So what made that something you guys wanted to look at specifically?
Well, there was some prior research that, well, one, again, there isn't a lot of research actually done on financial planners. And one of the few papers that we found that even began to address this topic was done by Thomas, I'm probably going to butcher his last name, but Philippon. And he published in 2016 an article that was looking at, he called it the FinTech Opportunity. It's on the National Bureau of Economic Research, the NBER website, so anybody can go look up this paper. He was particularly interested in regulatory changes and how fintech, could be a disruptor, and what he found different. He didn't have the same data as us or anything like that, but he often, well, he did come to actually similar conclusions that we came to, which was sort of interesting, but even using the different databases and things that he used. But he, like us, sort of thought that it should make people faster, but it didn't seem to look that way. And so, in our paper, we thought about what he had found, but then, again, we have a different data set. And so we were investigating, we had a bunch of hypotheses, but to just kind of sum them up, we were interested in sort of data gathering technology, like does data gathering technology lower the time spent in the data gathering phase or even in the data monitoring phase, afterwards, continuing to collect, to your point, Daniel, information over time and, having to redo a financial plan or, not redo, that makes maybe it sound bad, but not redo a financial plan, but we do financial planning. We do not, necessarily just write a financial plan. And so the rewriting and writing of financial plans to me is inherent in the process. So anyway, the data gathering and the data monitoring phase both, does data gathering data or data gathering technology help with that? We were curious about plan production technology. Would that have some sort of relationship with analysis and evaluation? We weren't really sure even what direction that would go. That particular hypothesis didn't have a direction. We just kind of said, what is the relationship? Same thing. We were also curious about plan production technology in relation to the relationship and the recommendation of the plan itself and sort of how that looks. And then we were curious a little bit about just, the different ways that people can present plans and sort of then, what is the relationship between technology and actually plan presentation? Are people just kind of like handing out these big reports or, is there more stuff going on that could maybe be more interactive? So.
Sure. Now, you said sort of the main hypothesis was that planning technology would make it more efficient or more timely. Now, were you trying to account for client involvement in that process, i.e., self-directed data gathering versus passive aggregation, or how are you approaching that?
We were kind of asking open-ended questions. A major limitation to this particular paper is just how do we measure this stuff? We're curious about it. We came up with some, what we thought were clever survey questions. But, we weren't talking to the clients. We were just talking to the advisors. And, in particular, we were talking to advisors that love Michael Kitces. So they are perhaps weird in a lovely way amongst, the advisor community as a whole. And so, that is a limitation, how we measure these things, who we're measuring, what came into account. And so for a lot of these questions about time, we were simply asking for guesses, if you will, from the financial advisors themselves and saying, how much time do you spend doing this? How much time do you spend doing that? In a week, what does this look like? And tried to get a representation. It would be amazing to be able to, actually follow a firm, for 6 months and get a true, not only what they think they do, but then actually a true reading of what they do. I mean, we know from lots of other psychological research that what people think they do and what people actually do are usually wildly different things. But we got to start somewhere. So line in the sand.
Sure. So what were some of the key findings in this study?
Yeah. So maybe, okay, so kind of going back to what we just talked about with the hypotheses, I think that that is maybe an easier way to sort of break this down. So we found some interesting stuff, and more stuff than just what happened with the hypothesis. We also kind of just, we were interested in like different demographics, and sort of understanding like, what do the CFPs do in comparison to the non-CFPs? What do people do that are working in a silo, compared to the people working in a solo? So I think it's important to say that for data gathering, our hypothesis that we were thinking that if you have data gathering technology, it should make time spent in data gathering less. We didn't find that. So that hypothesis was rejected. But we did find some other, just sort of weird or relationships of note. For example, data gathering for CFPs usually took a little less time. We don't necessarily know why. We can certainly speculate, but CFPs compared to non-CFPs, CFPs spent less time doing data gathering. The silo and ensembles, when we compare them to solos, they spent less time doing data gathering. So maybe these individuals have more structure in place. Maybe the solo is the one doing all the work, and so they reported their hours, differently than individuals that work in silos versus ensembles. Perhaps what I think, and I actually think that Derek and Michael and Kate and Alan, my co-authors, would also think that we looked at a lot of psychological traits, the big five personality traits in this study as well. Mm-hmm. And conscientiousness, agreeableness, and neuroticism, those were all related to spending more time data gathering. And if you think about that, conscientious people, agreeable people, neurotic people, mm-hmm. Are perhaps, more nervous, or perhaps just more concise or precise, or, feel like there's always the need for more information. And so personality-wise, they're spending more time data gathering. When it comes to, analysis and evaluation, tech-wise, kind of the basis of the study, the only significant association that we found, all else being equal, was that those advisors that reported using a specialized tool and those who reported using spreadsheets were spending more time in the analysis step, which, sort of makes sense, versus those that are using, a specialized tool, but just a generalized planning software. And so, so to some of the demographics, the female advisors were spending more time than the males for analysis and evaluation. When probably most interesting, and what we'll talk, or what I'd like to talk about, I guess, in the conclusions of this study, was when we looked at a 1% increase in the logged number of clients, and we can talk about why we did that, there was a decrease in reported time spent in the analysis step. And so we logged the number of clients to deal with the fact that our data was very skewed. So our range was 1 to 3,000. Somebody reported, or an individual reported having 3,000 clients, but the mean was only 129. And so we logged number of clients to deal with this sort of skewed issue. It's a common practice, but just kind of helps to make everything a little bit more even, mm-hmm. And make the analysis make a little bit more sense, instead of having these, crazy skews. And so that was sort of interesting, but at the same time, it makes sense. If you have more clients, maybe you have less time, to be spending on analysis and evaluation. Similar to before, we found that conscientious advisors spend a lot more time in the analysis and evaluation. Ensemble advisors, people working in an ensemble firm, which is a large firm, lots of advisors, lots of support staff, they're spending more time when compared to a solo, but if you're a solo and you're trying to make stuff work, maybe you don't have, as much time.
So Did your study take a look at those ensembles and have a way of asking the question? Is it maybe communication between team members? It's the time to look up the data in the CRM or to get the notes from the other planner who did the data entry before you start working on the analysis, or was there any granularity like that?
We did ask, who is working on all these different pieces, and looked at those numbers in different ways, but the data was getting so small, slicing into things like that, that I'm not 100% sure like what that would really tell us with just such small slices.
Sure.
But it was something that we were very much aware of, that on an ensemble team, it may be, 10 different people have their hands in this plan, whereas if you're a solo, it's maybe just you. And so, that's going to look a lot different. Maybe a whole department, is taking care of this particular aspect of the analysis. Whereas, again, if it's a solo, it's just you. For the recommendation, in terms of the recommendation development, sort of, women were spending more time than men again. People with more clients were spending less time again. Conscientious advisors and neurotic advisors were spending more time, which, by the way, neurotic advisors, or neuroticism, I should probably say, like advisors do not tend to be neurotic, which probably makes sense. I mean, if I was a client sitting across from somebody who's more nervous than me, it's probably not going to help my nervousness.
Sure.
So take that for what it's worth. But I mean, it also makes sense that if you're a particular nervous person or you have nervous tendencies, that you would be, really worried about getting that right.
Sure.
And then presenting the data, was also kind of interesting. We found it technology-wise that, in those meetings where TVs or projectors were used, more time, was being spent on presenting the data. And I would imagine, that if you're presenting with a projector or, with a TV, that there is some interaction, a lot more discussion perhaps between you and the client. And so perhaps why that was, increasing the presenting of the data. Ensemble firms, did spend more time again than solos. And the particular psychological thing that was, or the personality thing that mattered in presenting was openness, which I thought was kind of interesting. So again, it kind of speaks to that idea that in the client advisor meeting, if I'm working with a more open advisor, maybe there really is more dialogue going on, just because that's sort of the natural way that would go.
Sure.
So, not to bore everybody to just like keep going, but, generally, if we look back over our hypotheses, sort of across the board, technology really oftentimes led to more time spent in each area, except for when we're talking about presentations. There wasn't much of a relationship outside of the those that use the TV and projector, did tend to spend more time. Sure. And so what we sort of took away, or the implications, what did we learn, from doing this, is that when we think about, or what I've thought about since then, is that technology isn't really helping us serve more clients, or even serve them faster. And to the point about more clients, there's been some research it's older research by Dunbar, Robin Dunbar. He's a British anthropologist. And he was kind of like, people can't really handle, generally more than, 150 relationships. His magic number was like around 129. And going back to the idea of military, that this was even like Roman armies, would set up in relation to Dunbar's number, because you just can't, our brains physically kind of cannot keep track of more than like about 150 people or 150 relationships. And so And so then the fact that our finding was that, the average firm has about 129 clients, and it really wasn't, technology wasn't helping anybody to serve dramatically more. We didn't find that relationship. When we're thinking about efficiency, I don't know that the answer is necessarily you can serve more clients, get this technology and you can serve more clients. I think maybe the question is, you know, let's find 100 clients that we like, serve them really well, and go home at night and enjoy your life. I think that life work balance, should maybe be what we're chasing to a level of efficiency. um, we also found things that pointed to the fact that technology only really helps advisors go deeper. The fact that so many advisors are conscientious, which is a wonderful trait. Instead of taking 10 minutes, to do something, they're taking 2 hours because they're kind of like, well, what else? Well, what else? Well, what else? And so at some point, there is this idea of, okay, well, asking what else maybe 7 times is good, but if we do it 8 times, now we've reached a point of diminishing returns. And so, where do we draw that line? We don't know from the study that we have. But again, I think that's important in terms of the work that financial planners do, and perhaps the pressure that individual advisors, going out to have their own practice or even working within a practice, just kind of realizing the finite ability, of what we can do emotionally, even though we have these computers that can compute, all these things, or, this financial planning software that can do all these calculations, so super fast. That doesn't mean that you're going to comfortably serve, any more than probably about 130 clients. And so to think that bringing on technology is going to help you to get to 250 comfortably, that's just not the reality.
So there's a whole bunch to unpack there. I mean, there's a enormous amount of takeaways. I'm just sitting here thinking about all the different things that come out of that. So I mean, the idea that planning technology helps us go deeper, I think we could intuit somewhat, right? I mean, it would take me, I don't know, weeks to do one Monte Carlo analysis by hand, if I was going to try. I don't even know if that's possible.
You could probably do it in a week, Daniel.
I don't. That would be a hellish week for I think most of us. But I mean, the idea that you can run that through in 15 seconds off of planning software, or change one variable and have it affect 20 different outcomes in different areas. I mean, that sort of stuff obviously is efficient, but the finding that it's not saving us time, I think, is really key. Because we're sort of seeing the growth of course, sort of mass planning, right? We're seeing firms adopt either no fee, low fee, supported planning, self-directed planning, and in some cases at price points where I don't understand the economics, or the amount of time you could possibly work on a plan for a client is so constricted by the sheer economy of scale you'd have to obtain. So do you think that we're going to see planning technology maybe to begin to develop in a direction where it is actually more efficient, where it's somewhat more direct and to the point, or do you think we're going to see more of a divergence between maybe call it a very high-end financial planning software program style between smaller practices and sort of a more industrial mass production version of planning in other cases? I guess the question here being, where do you see us going with these sorts of findings?
Well, we certainly hope. I mean, I don't want to speak for, all of my co-authors, but, we doing research on what technology actually does and letting the technology companies know, that is a big step in the right direction. And, whether it becomes, whether the software evolves, to actually help people be more efficient, or if the technology becomes more, narrow in focus, so that, you have a special tool for just about everything, a special tool for estate, a special tool for Social Security, a special tool for retirement projections, and that maybe that is is better in some way because it would help us monitor our time, and do, fancy things for when that's appropriate. Um, but it also, I would challenge, for the average financial advisor, for the everyday financial advisor, to actually, I mean, it will take time. It's never easy to do something like this, but to clock your time, be aware of how long it takes you to do a financial plan, and then, and how long it takes other people, perhaps in your firm to do a financial plan. And if you adjust that time, up or down, knowing full well that the plan is just one of many. It is an iteration. If we're truly doing financial planning, and so, when is enough for the plan to be appropriate, knowing that we're going to review it again next year and that very likely within 2 years it's going to need an adjustment. Um, then, we have to ask ourselves, what is it? It is our probably natural propensity, given the high correlation of conscientiousness and people working in financial planning, that again, your natural inclination is going to be driven to go deeper, to spend lots of time, to look at it, 7 ways to Sunday. And I'm not saying that that's not great. I'm sure that there's lots of great financial planning going on. But if you're burning yourself out, for the sake of burning yourself out, arguably that's not, that doesn't help anybody. That doesn't help the firm. That doesn't help you. That doesn't really help the client. And spending all this time on like one single perfect plan, then we neglect, wanting to do a plan again in the future, because we just spent all this time doing this other one. We don't want to be too attached to it, I guess.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I think it could mean a lot of things for technology. I mean, certainly we need it, but it's like Steve Jobs. He was always like, you don't know what you need if you've never used that thing before. If we, before we all had iPhones or smartphones, we didn't know that we needed this thing and how well it could make our lives, maybe not so well sometimes. Sure. And so even thinking of, what hasn't been built, that would be interesting and, would really actually help people.
Sure.
And it's probably a different technology or a different, set of technology pieces, depending on the type of planning that you're doing, or really the type of families or individuals that you're working with, and the complexity of their financial needs.
Sure. So, I mean, you've already talked about a couple takeaways, right? Timing, how long it actually takes you to develop plans. Not letting perfect be the enemy of good when it comes to sort of developing them. Being aware, of maybe some of your own big five traits, and thinking, is this anxiety on my part driving me to spend more time on this, or is it really fine? What beyond or above those, are there any other lessons or applicable things you think planners really should be thinking about or learning from this research and applying to their own practice to either improve it for clients or maybe cut back on sort of the wasted time?
I think that we should, certainly for those that can, that are not, that are maybe they're in a solo and thinking about bringing someone on, or even those, currently working in silos or ensembles, although silos don't necessarily work in a team, but also thinking about who else is on your team. It can be very difficult knowing that you're conscientious or knowing that you're, kind of a nervous person, to actually pull yourself back. You can measure how long it takes you to do a financial plan, but if you think all financial plans take 25 hours, then that's just what you're going to think. And so it's probably important to build people into your team that have different skill sets or complementary skill sets that may help you to look at how long something takes in a different way or in a different light. So helping yourself to find someone to check, what it is that you're doing and, truly spending time efficiently. I also think, to a point that I've made, but maybe didn't stress that, and I might just be particularly sensitive to this given, what all has happened in 2020. But, if you have 50 clients that you like, if you have 75 clients that you like, if you have 100 clients that you like, that's pretty good, and you may never really grow much more than that as an individual. If you want 500 clients, well, then there probably needs to be a couple of advisors working there, for you to serve those 500 individuals well. And for you, to have a normal 40-hour work week, and have, a high quality of life. I very much believe, that financial planners need to take care of themselves in order to do good work for others. And so I think that that is important. And then, if we were to have, or if we were to recognize that, okay, if I do scale back maybe some of my deep dives, or if I choose to just deep dive on these particular things that, really need that sort of critical, slower, maybe multiple iterations, multiple angles to look at the problem, and pull back in some of the other areas where maybe things are more just straightforward, then, what do we do with that time? And that can be the deeper conversations or better conversations with our clients. I think that that is an important consideration. And I would, I think those things, think about a team and how to support yourself. Think about, what it really means, that it's no surprise necessarily that in all the, we had over 1,000 advisors, that took part in this survey, so no small number. And, granted, they were predominantly male, they predominantly CFP holders, predominantly RIAs, and so they're not a true reflection of the world of financial planning, or all the different ways people can work as a financial planner. But I think it does, say something about, this is our stake in the ground, and sort of, how do we want to move forward from here? What other ways can we sort of investigate, how financial planners are actually doing financial planning, and are they gaining efficiencies? Are they not? How are they potentially using those efficiencies? And, you could argue that the technology is efficient, and like what you said, that, you could spend 2 weeks, doing a Monte Carlo analysis by hand. That, doesn't sound great. And the fact that we can do it, so quickly now, and be in client meetings and adjusting on the fly, and running, and having the calculations appear, or having the analysis appear, it's pretty powerful. And so making sure then that we use that power, in a way that serves us, but also serves the clients.
Sure. So where do you think this research goes? What does version 2.0 look like, or what projects sort of come from this?
So we actually just, let's see, maybe like just a couple of months ago, released our 2020 version. So we did, the data that's in the paper that we're talking about right now is from 2018, and we do that survey every other year. And so we just released a white paper on the KITSIS website that looks at it. Strikingly, the thing, I would say go look at it, it's so different, but really that's the thing that's so striking, is that the data was like exactly the same. People, 2 years have gone by, we're in a pandemic. It was actually kind of just going on as we were finishing up this paper. And our survey, everybody was kind of answering in the same way. I mean, there was no dramatic changes whatsoever from 2 years to a year. So I think that is kind of interesting, just how stable perhaps financial planning is, or was, or continues to be. And we also, one thing that we talk a lot about at KITSIS is, it's one thing to do a bunch of cross-sectional research, which is what this is. We're comparing this group to this group, but we can't compare the same person over time. And so we want to be able to do that. We want to be able to have that RIA who's in his, or he or she is in his first couple of years of practice, and how did they answer the survey, and then we resurvey them again in 3 years, and we compare themselves to themselves, and sort of looking at then longitudinal data. Wouldn't that be interesting to look at somebody in their first 5 years compared to the next 15 years?
I'll
So
say as a student and a practitioner, yes, it would be interesting.
yeah, it would be super cool. So that is one of the things that we are working on, how we want to design that sort of data collection. And so I guess as a call out, if I'm allowed to do that, I'm going to do it. You can cut it out if you don't want to. But go if you know that, or if you hear that KITSIS is doing a survey, participate. Participate. It is so important for us to hear from everybody, individually, even for cross-sectional data. We still want to know. Actually, we've just finished a survey unrelated to this research, but it was a survey that we did on financial planning or financial planners and their well-being. How are they doing? Do they like their jobs? Looking at all kinds of different aspects, looking at different psychological things, looking at different personality things. And it's, I'm sorry, Daniel.
No.
I have a Mac and it shoots through to my phone, or shoots through to my computer. And so, yeah, just different types of collecting different types of data so that we can look at these types of questions in real time, or in overtime, really. What does it look like? How much time is an advisor spending on their technology and how they're using their technology in the first year compared to after they get used to it? Or, what combination perhaps of different technology pieces over time, lead to greater or less efficiencies within the practice itself. It would be really nice, to be able to answer some of those questions, but that takes time.
Sure. Well, Dr. Lurtz, I want to say thank you for being on the program with us today and sharing some of the great lessons from your research. And I know I'm personally looking forward to a lot more of it to come.
Thank you. Thank you.